Hi, Terry.
Hi, Thaler.
It's a pleasure today to be speaking with Terry Laban, who is a pioneering comic artist and more recently a fantastic graphic recorder. One of the things that impresses me is I don't think visually. Uh,
Hmm.
I I tend to draw more linearly in
Right.
thoughts. So this idea that when you hone a conversation and you know what the center idea is and you know where to put that on the page, how
Yeah.
do you do that?
How do you do that? Okay. Well, I mean, I guess that's the gist of it, I mean, there's techniques for doing it. Graphic recording listening isn't like listening. Like I'm having a conversation, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm responding to that, or I'm mirroring you. You know, when we have conversations, we want to mirror people and let them know that we're listening and reflect what they're saying. So we have that interaction. That's not what happens with graphic recording. What happens with graphic recording is uh, you are interested in recording things in a combination of words and images. That's what we call visual thinking, and it's the same kind of dynamic that's at work with things like comics and cartoons and infographics, or even like the internet itself, where we always are encountering words in conjunction with images, and they support each other. With visual thinking things, it's much more integrated. So that with most comics, cartoons, and infographics and graphic recording, we can't separate the words and images. You know, if you take one out, it doesn't make sense. So when I'm listening to somebody speak, for instance, um, I'm listening for big ideas first of all. So I'm especially listening when people are starting paragraphs or saying, "This is what this talk is about." I know that that's going to be important. I'm listening for things that can create good images, so especially if people are using metaphors. They're saying, "Oh, you know, this is like a jar of gummy bears." Somebody said that. I did a recording recently, or you know, we're thinking out even things that simple phrases like we need to think out of the box. Okay, well that's gonna be, I know that's gonna be a good phrase. Um, I don't really worry about things like stories. When people tell anecdotes, I'm not worried about that. That's not really going to be, those are always going to illustrate the main part of the talk, but they're not going to be the main idea. You know, they're always going to point to a main idea. So I'm not going to draw that guy. You know, when I was a kid, I used to go downtown on the bus and this and this and this happened. I'm not going to bother drawing the guy going down on the bus. That's not going to be germane. Um, I'm really listening to what that's pointing towards. Um, uh, and you know, as you do it and as you practice that kind of listening for the big ideas, and you become very conscious that when people speak, you know, people tend to speak in similar ways. I mean, talks are structured, right? People will say the big ideas, then they'll illustrate those ideas with examples or statistics, whatever they're going to do. They'll sum it up, and then they'll move on to something else. And that's how people speak. So I'm listening for that. I'm aware of that structure, and I'm listening to it structurally. Yeah. So that's kind of how it works for me. So then, in terms of how do you record that? How do you get it down on the page? Um, that's always like a really tricky thing. Um, and there's, you know, there's so much kind of what's the word I'm looking for? When things happen randomly and you kind of accept that and go with it. I'm old, so I'm spacing out. There's a word that I use a lot, and I can't describe it. But you have to have a certain amount of faith that when you put something down, you're going to have to work with it. And I mean, graphic recording always involves putting something down and going, "Oh God, you know, what are they going to do?" And there's always a danger that people aren't going to continue their points, and that people are going to, you know, end the talk right where you didn't think they were going to, or, you know, so for that reason, for instance, like if people say, "I'm going to give you 3 reasons for X," you never write down 1, 2, 3, because chances are, A, they're not going to say it like 1, 2, 3. They won't say 1 is this and 2 is that. They might go 1 is this, and they'll just keep talking, and you'll think like, oh, they're going to say another number, but they won't. And then you'll realize, oh, they made the point. So it's much better never to put down numbers. Just write down what they say and don't make it like that, like something that you're going to have to fill in, because that may not happen. So, I mean, you learn to think ahead a little bit. It's just with experience, like, oh, I know they're not going to say numbers, so I'm not going to write down numbers. Or you start to get a sense of, like, you look at the time, and if you still have like a big, I try to leave space for everything I think is going to happen in the talk. And people will send me PowerPoints and agendas and things like that, which helps, but you never know if they're going to stick to that. So if you stand in front of your board and you're like, oh, well, here's the PowerPoint slides, they're going to have to do this and this, I'm going to leave this and this and this. Well, they may spend like 45 minutes on this and never get to that. So you have to just have a sense of, I think the best thing is to think about time and think about how much space you have. And, oh, well, if it's starting to look like the talk's going to get to the end and you've got like a big space over here, maybe you should put something over there. But sometimes you just have to step out. And this is like the really scary thing, is sometimes you just have to step out and say, you know what? I'm going to make this point like a big cursive writing right in the middle of the board. I'm just going to do it because those kind of graphic elements look cool. And you don't know if, like, there's been times when I made like a big like thing in the middle of the board and like there was no follow-up. I mean, it wasn't an important point, and that can happen. But I think in the end, you have to kind of have faith of, what people want out of this is a nice looking chart. And the thing about it is, this is interesting. Whatever you record, 90% of the time, and this isn't true all the time, but 90% of the time, what you record, that's what people are going to think is important. So just the fact that it's there kind of sanctions it. So your choice is self-validating, in other words, often. And so you're like the authority. So what you put it there because it was important, so they'll accept that it was important, even though maybe like objectively speaking, it wasn't that. So there's a bit of psychology involved. Now, I mean, there are times when people say, hey, you missed this. Can you fit it in? That happens.
That's a heck of a lot of power. And I imagine people can push back. I know that you also record conversations.
Mm.
And can you tell me how recording a conversation might be different? And has anyone ever come to you and said, you really didn't get it right in this conversation?
No one's ever said that, or they haven't said it yet. Actually, conversations are a little easier in some ways because they're more subjective and they're more free flowing. With a speech or with a speaker who has a PowerPoint and an agenda and a structure, they can actually say, oh, hey, here's some points I wanted to make and did make, you didn't get them. Where are they, right? But in a conversation, a discussion that's happening, you're just recording what people say. First of all, there isn't that. There is no structure that they're going to come at you like at the end and say, oh, you didn't get that. And also, just that and people don't, people aren't recorded. I mean, it might be recorded, but I mean, people aren't going to come away with it with that. You're kind of making the memory. In other words, you're kind of making the memory. So in that case, I think your choice I think you have even more power. I mean, it's such a magical thing to see a conversation transformed into a graphic complete with images that I think people get very captivated by that. And that becomes the thing. That object becomes the thing. The object kind of takes on the reality of what just happened, and kind of transforms it at the same time as it kind of validates and sanctions it, which is a really interesting thing. So, yeah, I mean, conversations also can be easier because the information comes slower and it's a little more random. People will often digress in conversations and not, get to main points. I mean, you have a little more time often to play with what you're doing.
Interesting. I know that you recently recorded 9 hours of sessions.
Yeah, last year I did that. Uh-huh.
How did you maintain the focus on listening? I often think about what gets in our way of listening, and fatigue and being cognitively overwhelmed is one of those things. How did you maintain high standards during those 9 hours?
Oh, well, I'm not sure I did, but I mean, I did my best and I got pretty tired by the end. You know, you just, I mean, you're there with your markers, and it's so much of a in the moment type of thing. You know, it's the kind of thing where when you're in it, it's easier to keep going. I mean, when it stops, then you realize how tired you are and distracted you are. But once it starts to go, you're like, okay, here I am. I mean, by the end, it got wearisome. But I mean, the interesting thing is that experience, but that was like kind of an important gig for me, because a lot of people saw it. First of all, because it was so much graphic recording, I really got to a level with it I hadn't got to before, because I'd never done that much. 9 hours, bang, and it was like bang, 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 bang. I mean, I literally, and the place was like 2 floors. So some of the things were below and some of the things were above. So, and there was like maybe 10 minutes between the talks. So I had done like the titles of the boards first. So I was ready to go, but I still like had to run up and down stairs and get set up. And like, it was really, I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, 10 minutes, I can rest. I couldn't. But I mean, I think it really, by the end, that kind of listening was becoming more like I was really understanding the structure in a way of how to do it, like in terms of that structure of listening for those points, because they were all the same. It was all the same process. It was all the same kind of listening. And when you do something like that, and you just have to really push yourself, you get to a level where you're not thinking about the things that you were thinking about before. You just become like, it just, it completely envelopes you. And you get to a state,
Terry, can you tell me about one time that you really felt you were having a profound impact in listening to people and in speaking in your own way and doing this recording?
Um, let me think. Oh wow, you put me on the spot. Like it all kind of runs together. But I mean, I did a conference at the end of last year. Well, it was last September, like 2 all-day conferences for this real college conference. I was there like 2 days for like 8 hours a day. Like the first day I did 8 charts actually. So it was almost as much as the other one. And, people just kept coming up to me and telling me how much they liked it, and, thanking me, and like, taking my card. You really feel, and also, like, this is a really cool thing. And especially when you do these all-day conferences, as you do the charts, and I mean, they're big, they're 40 by 60 sheets of foam core, which is like 6 feet by, 5 feet or whatever. The charts start to accumulate in the space, and you start to get surrounded by them, and they were taking them and putting them on, easels and whatnot out in the lobby, and the whole place was just filling up with charts, which gives this feeling of, and we made towers, like there's a thing called making towers where you can stack 3 charts in like a triangle and stack them, so you get the structure, and you get this feeling of that the conference is like populated by the experience, that all the experiences that people have had kind of populate the space in the form of these images. And I think it really transforms the space in a really cool way, so that was really cool. It was really cool to see that. And I've seen it in other ones. I have, but it really happens more with like a multi-day thing where you're really doing a lot of charts. But generally speaking, I have to say that people are like they're really moved by this thing in a way that like it almost surprises me, because I don't feel that way about it myself, but it's such a surprise for them, that somebody's doing it, and that you're producing this thing, and that this experience they have is captured. It's really, it is a magical thing, and people get very excited about it. And that's very gratifying,
It's gratifying to hear about it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Bonus question for you about complexity.
Mm.
Have you ever illustrated a really complex idea and had a breakthrough, or have you yourself just ever had a breakthrough in understanding or communicating a really complex idea?
Oh gosh. I mean, in terms of like, that's a hard thing to say. You're always pleased when you come up with an image that you feel really works or something that looks really good. Um, um, and it's always very pleasing to come up with like, because I mean, I'm a cartoonist. I have like an impulse to simplify things and make them understandable. And that's where a lot of this visual thinking stuff comes from, is this impulse to take things down to a way that's immediately apprehendable by a viewer. Like, oh, I get that, by that combination of words and images. So when that happens, it's really satisfying. Um, my breakthroughs have tended to be more about process than about imagery. Like I was talking about the numbers thing, like I've kind of come to this point where I've realized you don't have to look at the PowerPoint at all, that you're not recording the PowerPoint. Like the PowerPoint, you don't have to record that because that's PowerPoint and people can get those slides. Like I use the PowerPoint for spelling basically. And especially when you're in, and there's always, especially like I did like I was in this meeting of medical suppliers. They make like medical devices, right? And like these devices were just like, I mean, I couldn't like, they were like, catheter, like I mean, it was crazy, like stuff that I had to do and the diseases and whatnot. So if they had a PowerPoint where I could get the spelling, like that was good. But otherwise, you're really recording what what the speaker's saying and then the interaction in the room. And for instance, the last thing I did was an in-service day at Bucks County Community College. And there was a speaker that was talking about, she was talking about diversity and how we have to be accepting. And she mentioned female circumcision as one of the things that we have to like, I shouldn't exactly say we have to be tolerant of it, but we have to be understanding about the cultural context for that. Well, it sparked this like huge discussion in the room with the who was all the audience of who was all professors and faculty at Bucks County Community College, and it sparked this huge discussion. So I just kind of went with that and just recorded that interaction. It's like what's actually being said at the thing is what I'm concerned with, not that. But it took a while to realize that, because you think when you're going into it, oh, I'm here to like get the information that the person's saying. That's only partially true. That's only partially true. Really you're there to get what's going on in the room and transform that into a graphic entity.
Thank you.
That was a breakthrough.
Thank you so much for explaining this capturing of experience.
Oh.
Was the word you were looking for serendipity?
Yes, thank you. Oh my God. Yes, serendipity. It is like one of my favorite words, actually.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Thaler.